As Israel's descendants grew in numbers in Egypt, they began to pose a threat to the Egyptians. They were first enslaved, and then the Pharaoh made a decree to kill all the newborn sons born to the Israelites. One such baby was named Moses, and his mother put him in a basket and placed the basket in the river to get Moses to safety. Pharaoh's daughter found Moses and raised him in their palace. When Moses grew up, he saw an Egyptian beating an Israelite, to which he intervened and killed the Egyptian. He was forced to flee Egypt and settle in a distant land. 20 years passed, and Moses was tending to the flocks when he saw something burning from a distance. He investigated and found a bush that was on fire. God spoke to Moses from the bush and told him to go to Egypt and free the Israelites from slavery. He and his brother Aaron spoke to Pharaoh and asked him to let the Israelites go free, but Pharaoh refused. God began sending plagues of hail, locusts, boils, and more on Egypt to pressure Pharaoh to free the Israelites, but Pharaoh still refused. Finally, Moses warned Pharaoh that if he would not free the Israelites, the next plague would take the life of each firstborn son in Egypt, but his heart was hardened. God had the Israelites perform an act which would cause the Lord to pass over their household and not take the life of their firstborn sons. They took an innocent lamb and slaughtered it. They painted its blood around their doorpost, and everyone inside the homes with the lamb's blood on it was spared from this plague. The Egyptians did not perform this act, and every firstborn son in Egypt was killed. Finally, Pharaoh relented and let the Israelites go free. As the Israelites were leaving Egypt, Pharaoh changed his mind and decided to go up and attack them. The Israelites were trapped between the Egyptians and a sea, so they cried out to God for help. God heard their cries and parted the sea in front of them. The Israelites walked across the sea to safety, but the sea closed in on the Egyptian soldiers. Now the Israelites were in the desert following Moses with no food, water, or shelter. God provided for the needs of the Israelites in the desert by giving them food called manna and quail each day and water from a rock. When they arrived at a mountain called Mount Sinai, God had Moses ascend on the mountain and instituted a covenant with the people of Israel. He told Moses, "You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt, and now I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now if you obey me fully and keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." Moses descended the mountain and shared this covenant message with the Israelites, and they agreed by saying, "We will do everything the Lord has said." Moses went back up to the mountain to tell the Lord that the Israelites agreed to be part of the covenant with God. Moses continually went up and down the mountain, acting as a mediator between God and the Israelites. God then gave Moses the 10 Commandments, which served as the foundation for the covenant God was instituting with Israel. The 10 Commandments are: do not worship any god besides God, do not make idols and worship them, do not misuse God's name, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy, honor your parents, do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not lie, and do not be jealous. Moses shared the commandments with Israel and then began receiving further instructions from God. As he was at the top of the mountain, the Israelites began to grow restless. Moses was gone for some time and they assumed he was dead. They doubted God's faithfulness to them and wanted to make gods to lead them. Aaron decided to construct a golden calf and have the people worship it. The first 2 rules of the covenant they just agreed to were already broken by the Israelites. God was angry with the people, but Moses interceded on behalf of the Israelites. This and other acts of unfaithfulness led to God punishing this generation of Israelites by forcing them to wander through the wilderness and desert for 40 years before they could enter into the Promised Land. These 40 years were filled with problems and Israel's unfaithfulness. For example, on one occasion, the Israelites were grumbling against God and Moses, so God sent venomous snakes to punish the people. The people repented of their sin, and Moses interceded on their behalf. God had Moses make a fiery serpent and mount it on a pole. Then, when anyone who was bitten looked at it, he would live. Time and time again, Israel sinned against God and was punished. Then after they repented, Moses interceded on their behalf, and God forgave them. One of the only bright spots during this time was the man Joshua, who remained faithful to God and loyal to Moses during these years. Even Moses sinned and was punished by God and not allowed to enter the Promised Land. That honor was to be given to Joshua after Moses' death. This era of the Old Testament sheds light on many theological principles. First is God's faithfulness to deliver and guide his people. Despite the Israelites' captivity and grumbling against God, they were never forgotten by God. God was faithful to his promises to Abraham and delivered Israel when they needed him most. As they wandered through the desert, God guided them by a cloud in the day and a pillar of fire at night. He also provided for the Israelites' basic needs while in the desert. Despite God's faithfulness, the Israelites were unfaithful to God, which leads to the second theme of this era. Mankind is sinful and rebellious against God. The Israelites were constantly failing to properly follow God and obey Him. They complained, worshiped false gods, and disobeyed God's commands. The sinfulness of Israel allowed God to display His justice and mercy. In God's justice, He punished Israel for their sin. In God's mercy, He accepted their repentance over and over again, even though they deserved His wrath. This era also pointed to Jesus in an interesting way. There are many people, things, and events that serve as types of Christ. The Exodus was the freedom of the Israelites from slavery to the Egyptians, which points to Jesus' death on the cross, which was the freedom of all humanity from slavery to sin. The Passover lamb's blood caused God's judgment to pass over the Israelites, just as Jesus' blood causes God's judgment to pass over anyone who accepts His payment in their place. Moses interceded on behalf of the Israelites to be forgiven by God, just as Jesus intercedes on our behalf to God. Even the bronze snake on the staff pointed to Jesus, because just as the Israelites could only be saved by looking to the snake on the staff, humanity can only be saved from sin by turning to Jesus.